Hey, what's happening, everyone? Welcome to episode 11 of Two Drunks with a Mic, the podcast where we share our past so that others might have a future. Hey, just a couple of quick things before we jump into today's show. First of all, we want to thank everyone for their continued support through this journey. You know, it really is amazing to hear from people really from all over the world and them telling us just what a positive impact that our humble little podcast is having in their life, man. It's really, really cool to hear that and to hear from those folks. And second, I want to ask everyone listening to let us hear from you. Go to our website at twodrunkswithamic.com, go to the contact page and drop us a line. Let us know what you like about the show, maybe what you hate about the show, or maybe suggestions on ways we can improve. And you can also subscribe to the show on the website, as well as find it on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Google Podcast, and iTunes. And we are hoping to be on iHeartRadio pretty soon. And we'll keep you all posted on that through social media pages and all that. And as always, we ask that you share. Sharing has the greatest impact on our reach, period. I mean, it's a lot of legwork is how that happens. Just word of mouth. It's really kind of cool. And that's why we end up hearing from all these people too. So for those of you that have shared, thank you. We just ask you to continue doing that. I want to say this before we get going here. In the making of this episode, we ran into some of the most bizarre problems. To start with, we didn't have the best connection. So the sound is kind of weird. Mid-recording, I dropped a bunch of my equipment on the floor. It's created this huge crash. My toddler was trying his best to tear the house down around me. Dogs were going off on both ends of the conversation. And a friggin' ice cream truck, okay? It's February, you know? An ice cream truck was blasting Christmas music just outside my house. And to top it all off, Skype decided to cut Randy off mid-word, creating this really awkward gap in context. So I ended up having to cut some out, so it kind of gets weird there. To be honest with you, I just almost trashed the whole thing, but I didn't. I didn't because what we did manage to get done needs to be heard. And this is real life. And in real life, things don't always go as planned. So, you know, take it for what it's worth. So even before we had our first episode up, we wanted to get this guest on the show. I've never met him, but I have heard enough about his story over the years to know that what he has to say needs to be heard. And though we don't get his entire story in this segment, what he has to say, it's really important for those struggling. His message of recovery, man, is gold. His journey has been one of years of bouncing in and out of jails, halfway houses and programs, one of struggling to keep his family together and facing his deepest fears. So let's jump into this conversation as we welcome Randy's brother, Luke, to episode 11, Paralyzed Liar.
You know, Luke, Ian and I have made a couple of attempts of getting sober, and I think it took 2 or 3 times, and I know your story is a little bit different. And I know you were running and gunning for a long, long time, and I know this because you're my brother. But, you know, man, looking back, Luke, do you think that there was, other than the 800-pound gorilla, now that you've been sober for a few years now, and what is it, 3 years?
Yeah, I had 3 years in October.
Okay. You see anything else that, do you see, like I said, other than that 800-pound gorilla, what was keeping you out there? Did something come off?
You know, it's funny that you say that because that's not the first time, obviously, I've been asked that. I tell you, there's some days that I look back at my life and think, man, what was so much different? What is so much different now as opposed to all those times that I bounced in and out of the program, in and out of jail, in and out of halfway house? You know, because so many of those times where I'd end up in a treatment center or what have you, I was done. I was done living that way of life. I wanted to get sober with every fiber in my being, and yet I would find myself 6 months, 8 months, 4 months, 3 months, 2 months, later, being back out there running and gunning. And I look at my life today, and some days I still think, boy, what a gift this is. And I know I'm kind of talking in circles, Randy, but I guess my point is, I think the biggest difference is that I realize it's a gift today. And all those other times, I that's not good. You're going to have to edit that. Let me close this door, Ian.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, that'll just make it a little bit more organic,
Hey, remember that? Remember the compressor going off on that one episode?
You were getting past it.
No, you were. I got that on video, dude.
I mean, dude, I was getting my face was beat red, dude. Yeah, I finally, every time I come back in, I make sure that it's turned off, dude, because I was just flip my wig.
It's a trip because everybody's gone except for my dog, and I didn't want her bugging me, so I leave the TV on low, and I forgot that she barks every time an animal comes on a commercial or something. So that's what that was. So anyways, go ahead.
I just want to. So Luke, if I'm hearing you, which I think I am, because I think I'm very similar, you realize it's a gift. You realize that what's been given you in your sobriety is a gift. And this is the first time that, like you were saying, you've been in and out of jail, in and out of programs, in and out of halfway houses, all of this other stuff that seems to be a pretty common occurrence if you talk to a lot of addicts. This just seems to be the journey. I want to just kind of circle back to something to get some clarification. What was it in all of those times that you said that you wanted it with every fiber in your being, man, to not live that lifestyle anymore? I remember doing that myself. But what was keeping you anchored there? What was your motivation at that point to stay? Was it just that you were tired? Did you have somebody else that you might wanted to try to do it for?
Yeah, Ian, more times than not, it was, I did have a driving force. Like we were talking about earlier, my son's 18 years old, and, he's lived through a lot of this stuff with me. And, I would get sober and because I wanted to be that father that was able to be there for him, wanted to get back in good standings with my family, a number of different reasons, wanted to get sober and stay sober and to get my own life back. I went 15 years without a driver's license. Sometimes I would say, okay, Luke, don't drink until this. Don't drink until that. And I tell you what, every single time I tried to do something like that, I failed way before I met that goal. Mm-hmm. But then there was those scenarios where I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I wanted it just to get better. And it was for myself a lot of time, and I would get sober. And like I said, there was a bunch of different increments. I was a big 6 month guy, 6 month and out. I don't know if there's any validity to that 6 month mark or not. But I would jump headfirst into these steps, and there would always come a point in time in that process where fear would set back in, and I just didn't think I was good enough for certain things, and I just didn't think I just never really got comfortable into my own skin, and it took some deep soul searching and some deep step work, especially in this last process of digging deep. It was a struggle though, Ian. It really was.
There is validity, I think, to that 6 month thing. And I know Randy and I talked about it. I had an experience with that. There was never a time in my periods where I'd stopped drinking that I never, there was a couple times that I really wanted to quit. One, I stayed stopped for 10 months. And went out and was out for 3 years after that. Then there was a couple other times I might make it a couple weeks. My resolve would just vanish, and something would happen and I would just figure, well, you know what, I'm feeling pretty good. I think I got it figured out this time. And, you know, the same lie that a lot of alcoholics fall to. I got it figured out. I can handle it this time. And the next thing you know, 6 months passes, dude, and I can't even remember a lot of what happened. But when I finally did make it into the program at the rescue mission, I was about 6 months in, and I ended up having, I forget what it's called, paw or something like that. Something to do with these withdrawals. Dude.
Yeah.
And it was like the day after I stopped drinking. The
Wow.
Everything came back, man. All of the cravings, everything, man. And I thank God that I was in a program where I had people that were trained in this, where I could go to and say, hey man, what's going on? Because this is how I'm feeling, dude. I was in tears, man. And I remember talking to the director of the men's program, and he said, well, this is what's happening. Just stick close, you know. And through that process, it lasted a couple of days, but I stayed close with my sponsor, stayed close with into the program, and because I knew I had been, like I said, it was 6 months in, I had gotten enough education and, you know, in me. Most importantly, I was getting a lot of spiritual food in that program, and I really didn't want to go back. And I knew drinking for me was a death sentence because they had already told me that for years, man. And of course, I never listened to them, but all that was starting to sink in. So I think there is something to that 6 month period, you know, where people get to that point, and unless they stay active and anchored in what they have done so far, it does take a lot of people out, because we do start feeling better and we're like, hey, you know, I got it figured out. But, you know, I guess I would ask you have 3 years coming up on 4. When you think back on this time, though, at that 6 month mark, what were you doing differently at that point? Now, I know you mentioned heavy step work. Which steps were you in then at that time? Was it always the same markers? Did you ever like go 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, and then get stuck on 5, or, you know, like a lot of people seem to get hung up on certain steps? Or was it this time around, did you restart everything over and really start taking your time and really start to make an honest evaluation of what was really going on? Was there a difference in the way you did your program this time around?
Yeah, there definitely was. You know, to be honest with you, I sobered up in county jail. And when I was in county jail, I was looking at some felonies. I thought I was going away for a little while. And it didn't happen that way. Some charges were dropped. They terminated my probation, and I got a couple months in county jail. So when I got out of county jail, I was still hopeless. Okay. Because right before then, I made it a point to where, and I know you guys know that line in the big book where it talks about going on to the bitter end, trying to blot out that intolerable situation. And that's where I was going, because I was done trying this deal. I just wanted to go away. So when I got arrested, I feel like I got interrupted. Well, I sat in jail just long enough, and I talked to guys about it today, and I talked about God paralyzed the liar in me for a split second there, and I was able to see my life for what it really was for the first time in a very long time. So when I got out of jail, I came home to my girlfriend and my son. I got hooked up back with a sponsor, and we started into these steps. And in the very beginning, I did it very grudgingly because, like I said, I had done this in the past. I didn't think it was going to work, but I knew it was my only shot at staying alive, because I had many family members, many friends who had been through the same process of the steps and were living productive, happy lives. I got to step 4, and I was out of jail a couple of months, so I was probably sober 4, 5, 6 months. And there was a spiritual retreat coming up, and I hadn't been working. I had no money. I told my sponsor, I don't have the money for it. He said, don't worry about it. I paid your way. And he said, bring along that 4th step while you're at it. Little did I know it was a step retreat. So I got there on a Friday night. My sponsor asked me if I brought the 4th step. And I said, yeah. And he asked me if I was done with it. I said, well, I got a couple more things to write out. He said, get that done tonight because somebody's going to hear your fifth step tomorrow. So the next day was a Saturday. And what they do at this retreat is anybody that wants to take their fifth step, they write it on a piece of paper, and anybody willing to hear fifth steps write their names on a piece of paper. And it's kind of like a blind draw. And I got linked up with this guy from Indianapolis. This retreat was near me here in just the west side of Cleveland. And this guy comes to this retreat from Indianapolis every year with a group of guys. And we sat down and he asked about my life. And I told him his name is Larry. I still talk to him once in a while today. I said, Larry, I'll be honest with you. I feel like I'm going to be reading the newspaper to you. You know, I just didn't see the substance behind it because I had done it before. And I didn't intentionally leave anything out of my 4-step. I wasn't hiding anything. I had told all my secrets. So I just didn't understand what was going on. Anyways, he spun it at me from an entirely different angle. As I started reading my 4-step, he stopped me. He said, look, he says, we're going to look at this from another view. He says, I get it. If you need to tell me something you've never told anybody, get it out. He said, but let's take a look at your life when you're sober. And we really started to look at some situations in my life. And he says, because you keep getting sober and you keep starting this process and you keep returning to the stuff that's killing you. And he says, I really don't think you want to keep returning to it. So when he said that, and we started looking at scenarios in my life in the past when I was sober, I thought I was an honest guy. I thought I was a man of my word. What I found out that this dishonesty and all these character defects, they run in many different forms. You know, so he brought out some things in me that I couldn't even do myself. And when he did that, it literally changed my life. So from that moment on, you know, for anybody listening, I just want to say that the process of these 12 steps worked, first off. And, you know, I knew about step 5 because, like I said, I had done it a number of times. But then there's steps 6 and 7. What I didn't know, if I don't find things out in my 5th step with another person, what do I take at that point to step 6 and 7? Because in those previous steps, I'm starting to make a connection with God. So when I find out what my character liabilities are in step 5, I know what to take to step 6 and 7, and I know what to ask God for help with.
Right.
And Randy, you can attest to this. We grew up, you know, we had everything we needed and we had a pretty darn good childhood. But I think we were afraid of a lot of different things growing up. And I learned at a very young age to tell my dad what he wanted to hear, what he needed to hear. Okay. Whether that was the truth or whether that was a lie, I carried that trait all the way on into the rest of my life. To avoid confrontation. I was always afraid of an argument or confrontation. So even when I didn't agree with somebody, especially my loved ones, I didn't know how to sit down with people and have a conversation.
Right.
And talk about things. I would just say I would agree with them. And what happens after time, it starts setting up resentments. And those resentments, we all know what happens with those.
Right.
It was killing me.
Right.
Wow.
So that was the first real game changer for me in those steps. That's where I was at 6 months, Ian.
You know, what you just told me about learning that, about really kind of looking back at the family dynamic of the way that you grew up, taking ownership of a particular role in your family, that's actually really solid stuff. I didn't actually learn that part about me and my family dynamic through AA. Although it did come up later, like you were saying in the steps, you really do have to kind of look at that if you go about this honestly. But we had a family day, and I know I've talked about it before. We had a family day in the program that I was in. And so my mother, father, and sister they were invited. They came. There were several other people that were in the program with me. Their families came as well. And there was the one program director guy, John Gabbert. I talk about him a little bit sometimes because he gave some really valuable insight. And they had this mobile that stood on a stand, and they had all these different things like scapegoat, the Joker, all of these different types of roles that people take, whether they realize it or not, within a family. And, and he talked about the homeostasis of a family. So if something's out of balance, you don't have homeostasis. So you need to bring something back over here in order for things to balance out. And it was all very clinical kind of stuff, but it was super fascinating to me, man. And I'll tell you what, as much as I got out of it, my family got more out of it. As much out of it as probably me. And that was the best thing, man, because they understood that all those years that, my mom, for instance, may have been enabling me, of course, when I'm going to her out, and I'm in, just running and I'm going to her. Yeah, I want her help. That's what I'm all about at that point. And she's not going to deny her son. Most people won't. But what clicked for her was that might have been the best thing for her to do, was just pull the rug out from under me, because what a family member may think is a loving thing is actually pretty damaging. It's the opposite of what we might want to do. But yeah, that's interesting that you had that kind of pulled out through that step work like that, man.
That is very powerful, man. How you dissected all that. A lot of people, including myself, I get very uncomfortable with that, man. That's not an easy task. When you talk about confrontation, Ian, you're very similar. You guys are very alike right there. I kind of was on the other side where, being growing up in an alcoholic home, I had issues with anger. And I think that was based out of fear, I'm sure, of what maybe people thought of me, or how I don't know, man. I'm still working on that in my sobriety, because it's been creeping back up. And I'm trying to figure out what's going through my head, it's just maybe just things that I'm seeing, or just a bit of paranoia. I don't know, but it creeps back up, man. And I think it's just, but those are some of the things in sobriety that has, that's what I wanted to ask you, Luke. If, being sober for a while now, do you find yourself having to revisit, character defects quite often that you just can't, are there some of those that come up?
Oh yeah. Just like I touched on, I don't know if I named that character defect that I was talking about, as far as, I guess you could call it a bit of people pleasing, or it's just straight up being dishonest.
People pleaser, man. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find that that's creeping back in. It's funny you say that, because it's creeping back in just in my life today because of the things going on with Mason. It's tough because, I was in and out of his life for so long. And so you have this feeling of, is he going to respect my discipline? Is he going to respect what I say? And I know that's all fear-based, so that's not right. I have a job to do, and I got to do the best I can as a father. But that character defect comes in, and I don't want to hurt his feelings, and I don't want him to be, all that stuff. It's just, it creeps back in. And a lot of times I won't say what I need to say as a dad because of it.
Yeah.
And again, if that happens on that day, I pray about it every night.
Yeah.
And, just because I found that stuff out doesn't mean I bat 1,000 every day with it, because I'm going to God every day.
Right.
Every day.
Right. Okay, so there you go. It's, like I sometimes think I'm going to get this fresh breath air. God's going to come down and kiss me on my forehead, and I'm going to transform overnight. Like I tend to look for that, but it's not like that, man. It's every single day. You got it. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's, very difficult, but if you don't maintain it, it's very clear. That's what I'm saying. If you don't maintain on a daily basis, it's just because you're not picking up, man, you are still,
But you know what? But let me just say this though, guys, because that's a great point, Randy. But the truth of the matter is that non-addicts or non-alcoholic people, they have to do the same thing too, and they're not overly successful in their lives. So we're fighting a different kind of battle here. We're looking at years and years of a certain type of escape mechanism that we had. For me, it was drinking. For Luke, it sounds like you're a drinker. For Randy, you went where the party was. But Luke, like you just said a minute ago, the steps do work if you work them. They helped me, and I believe that they'll help anybody. But I just wanted to back up for just one quick second, man, before we lose something that you just said. In my last episode, I talked about the how of things, I guess, that honesty, openness, and willingness, that struggle. And I'll tell you, I just got contacted by a guy that got a hold of that episode, and he's like, man, he goes, this is exactly what I'm dealing with right now. And it is that unfortunate, once we come in, we're in a recovery, we start sobering up. Like Randy just said, their unrealistic expectation is that things are just going to automatically become, 100%. And we know that that's not the case, even years later.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do specifically to deal with your son, maybe deal with your wife, those that have been around you for years and stood by you, and you're blessed to have them in your life now, and that they just didn't walk away? What is it that you do? What is it that you do specifically, man, to recognize where they're coming from and meet them where they're at? Because you have a little bit of an image to live down here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's accurate to say. I think we all do.
Sure.
How do you specifically deal with that? I know you said that you pray about things every evening, which I think is fantastic, because if the wisdom's not within us, we have to go to God to get that. But how do you kind of cope with that? Where do you take that? Do you take that to a sponsor sometimes? Do you revisit your step? Or, you know what I mean, man? It's just kind of, it's a process.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a number of things that I do on a daily basis. I start my day in prayer. I start my day in a little bit of a meditation state, read some scripture, read some meditation books, and that's how I start my day. When I have pressing issues, especially within the household, within the family, and we're just not seeing eye to eye, that's when I definitely, prayer is my most powerful weapon, because a lot of times I will get frustrated, and I do not feel like picking up the phone, or I don't feel like traveling to a meeting, or I don't feel like traveling to one of my guys' house. So I'll say some prayers, and hopefully at that point, shortly thereafter, I'll have the willingness to call somebody. And, I found out that I have a good support group in this program and in other places. And I found out that a lot of these people, a lot of my close friends have had these similar situations, if not going through them now.
Right.
And, it's amazing, Ian. It really is, on how many people I got the disease of alcoholism, but I also have the disease of, I think I'm terminally unique or something.
Right.
And
that's Luke, you're absolutely right, man. That is the number one. That's one of the most, I wouldn't say number one, but that's one of the big things, man, is that, I'm so unique. There's nobody that'll understand me. And then you're in a meeting for the first time. And you're like, wait, what the hell did that dude just say? Dang, man, he was talking to me, and that's why I always encourage people, I know I told a story about a kid that, dropped out of the program and stuff, but what we tried to encourage him is like, man, you don't know why God's got you at that, going to these AA meetings. Maybe you're there to say that one thing that's going to bring somebody in and make them stay.
Right.
And that's why a lot of times too, I hear these arguments online of people arguing about the etiquette of being in meetings and stuff, and burning desires and stuff. And there's some really funny things out there, but I always went to stick it out. If I said, yeah, man, I had a home group, had to meet my sponsor there. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm going there. I'm there for an hour. I'm going to do whatever he's going to tell me to do. I'm probably not going to speak. I was never asked to, until a lot later. I did actually speak at, some meetings, speaker meetings and stuff. But, yeah, man, that's so huge right there, man. Yeah, I'm really glad you said that, because because it's a really rough going, man, by yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and sobriety and recovery is certainly no different, man. But
yeah, when you brought up how we feel unique, now that is so true. I mean, not just when you first come in AA and all that, and trying to.
Well, that's a main driver in our selfish life.
Oh man, I mean, it's just like I can't even put it into words, but that's such an alcoholic, all the way, addict, what have you. We definitely look at things differently, man, and I think that we live differently. But yeah, for sure, it's complex people, man. Like Dad would say, we can complicate a cup of black coffee.
Absolutely, yeah. And to further answer your question, Ian, is last week my wife and I, we sat down with the pastor of our church to speak about these things, with our son. God works through people. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And if we don't have that support group and we don't have things like we have right here, what we're doing, we don't have much, at that point. And it's just I've been blessed with the supports. I've always had support.
Yeah.
Always. Randy's always been there for me. My family. I took my family through a whirlwind, not just my son and my wife, but man, did I take my parents, my brothers, I took them. I was like that tornado ripping through people's lives. I just was that guy.
You love your family, right?
Absolutely.
Luke? Okay. I know you love your family. I love my family, but that's how insidious this is it'll take us. It'll make us destroy what we love the most. It'll make us do that. And that's why, as much of it as I think is a fight for life and death, a lot of what I try to talk about here is hitting home for the way people are kind of feeling, out there, that alone, that they're unique. Nobody's ever going to understand me. My family hates me. They don't trust me. It's like, oh man, you don't deserve their trust, number one, at this point.
Yeah.
And like Randy said before, I said it in the last episode, Gary Farrell, the guy I had on episodes 4 and 5, he said, textbook, dude. He's like, it's like my family doesn't want to hear it. They want to see it. And, I feel for those people that are out there, man. And all you can say sometimes is, man, just hold on. Just hold on, man. And, you can hear their fingernails ripping off, man, as they're slipping. Even online, man, you can see it. You just hear it in the way that they're communicating. It's like, oh man, that's heartbreaking, dude. But
yeah, it is. It really is. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's, in a lot of people, and in mine included, in the beginning stages of this recovery process, man, it's all about how you're handling your surroundings. And, when I came out of jail after 2 months, I came home and I had to face that destruction that I had just put on my family for years and years, right square in the face. I didn't get to run to no halfway house or a treatment center, although I wish I would have at some points in the early stages. It was right there. So every time that phone rang, or every time I left the house to go to a meeting, I would get that look. Like, is he coming home?
Yeah.
And it was tense. And guess what I had to do? I had to surround myself with sponsors, support groups, meetings, whatever I needed to do. And little by little, it got a little bit better. And I tell you, it was tough. It was very tough.
Yeah, I can imagine, Luke. You happen to see that in your family,
and it's like I said in that last episode, for years, man, we're pushing. But we have to do the opposite of that. We have to start pulling them in, man. And that's like, for me, I told my family, I said, you know what? This is what makes me tick. These are my triggers. This is how I think about certain things. Giving them permission, man, to call me out on that. And yeah, it is uncomfortable. You don't have their trust. Like you said, every time you get in the car, oh, where's he going? What's going on with this? You know,
Luke,
and it's, but you deserve that. That's the reality of it, you know, because at that point, man, and I obviously wasn't in your life there and can't speak, you know, authoritatively to it, but I could probably guess that what they're getting right then was a whole lot of words. Yet, you know, they're not maybe seeing to their satisfaction a whole lot of fruit of these actions that you're, you know, quote unquote taking. You know, they're skeptical of things, but you know, it's inspiring to me to hear that coming from you, because here you are 3 years later going strong, and hopefully things have kind of righted themselves with the family. You know, they're not looking at, you know, over their shoulder at you every time you go to the bathroom in a restaurant. That was one of my moves, dude. I'll be like, hey, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I go to the bar and get a couple shots.
I've been there, done that.
Yeah. You know,
I can remember my wife turning the corner. I had that line, and I might have been sober maybe 30 days or something. I was supposed to be sober anyhow. And I can remember doing that line. Hey, I'm heading to the bathroom. And then I'm at the bar, and then she comes around the corner, and she's got that look.
Yeah.
Just disgusted, hopeless, and just, I remember those days.
Yeah.
And you knew it was coming, but you just wanted those drinks. You had it set in your mind.
I knew it was coming. I couldn't wait. I couldn't wait. There was a bar right there.
You get to that state where you're willing to suffer the consequences. How about that?
Absolutely.
You know, okay, you know you're going to go to hell and back if you get back. But you're just going to go ahead and, because you already said it.
Well, that's the insanity of it, man, is that there is that. And I mentioned it before, man. I felt better when I drank, because, you know, whether I was feeling a little sick or what the deal, whatever it was, or maybe I just felt really, really good and just felt entitled to celebrating and be like, man, I just want to go have a few drinks. Man, that doesn't happen for people like me, man. Few drinks isn't what most people would think is a few drinks. A few drinks to me is a few weeks, you know, of drinking. And that's the insanity of it, man. You know, I'll sort it out later type of thing.
Yeah, I was talking to some guys earlier today. I had a short day of work, so I ran up to this treatment center. You know, it's 10, 15 minutes from my house, and I'm able to go up there. It's a blessing to have it there. And I know some guys, and we were just talking, and we were talking about that, the step 2, actually, that insanity. And it's a killer. It really is.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything that, and you know, that's one of the really sad parts about all of this is that, you know, like I'm sure you've heard, Randy knows, I'm incredibly blessed in my life. Everything that I have, you know, God has given me, and I thank him every day for it. Why on earth I have this much of a life left after, you know, almost 30 years of being out there? I don't know, man. The math doesn't compute for me. It doesn't make sense to me. But when I think about what you were just saying about that second step, that insanity and all of this stuff, I don't know about you guys, but for me, all of that stuff was instantaneous, man. I mean, the second I drank, it all came flooding back. And it was just like Randy had told me, the alcohol comes back with a vengeance. I didn't believe him at the time, so I figured I'd put it to the test, and it did.
Yeah.
It was all consuming, man. And I created a life that just allowed me to drink, allowed me to do this. I'd push people out. I'd lie, I'd cheat, I'd do whatever it took just to give me that time alone, man, so I could sit there with my bottle and just drink.
Yeah, we were talking about a story. It's just a little bit of history on how AA got started, and I won't tell the whole story, but you know, there was a guy that back in the 20s, a very good, very wealthy businessman who had one problem and one problem only. It was alcoholism. He just couldn't understand why he couldn't stay stopped. And I'm sure you guys have heard that world-renowned psychiatrist, Dr. Jung, back in the day.
Yeah.
This guy went and saw him, and he didn't go see him for, a day or two. He went and sat with him for 52 weeks. He had that much money. And he was getting ready to go home, and he thought to himself, relapse was unthinkable. He knew the inner workings of his mind. He knew what made him tick. He knew what made him drink. And nevertheless, by the time he got off that ship, he was drunk again. So he went back. He turned around, went back to Europe, and saw Dr. Jung again. He said, "Hey, listen, why did I drink?" And the doctor just simply told him, "You know what? In cases such as yours, you got a hopeless case, man. I can't help you." And that's what one of the most famous psychiatrists, that's where his words to this hopeless alcoholic is, "Man, I got nothing for you. I can't help you." And the guy said, "Are there any exceptions?" And he says, "Well, once in a while, these occurrences have been happening since the beginning of times. These people will have what they call their vital spiritual experiences." And I think what's so cool about that story, it's in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I think what's so cool about that story is anybody that's introduced, or anybody that's listening now, or anybody for that matter that's introduced to any type of recovery or program, we have a roadmap now to that spiritual experience. And for me and for many others, it started with those steps. And that's the goal with those steps, is to put God into our lives and to have that spiritual awakening. And that's the beautiful thing about it.
Yeah, that's powerful. I was just thinking, because before you were talking about that, you guys were touching on insanity. When that guy, after being sober a year, I wonder what really was that insanity that made him pick up. Was it like, "Hey, I've been sober a year, I could probably drink, kind of like a normal guy."
I'm sure that was part of it. Oh yeah. Yep.
That's, you see what I'm saying, Ian? That's,
I do see where you're saying.
Just how you create, because I knew you when I was out in Vegas and you were still drinking, but you structured your whole daily basis around that drink, and I remember seeing that. But that's the insanity as well, because that you feel like that's you're doing. I mean, at the time when you were making your own schedules. I remember that you kind of, and then when you would get off of work, you would make sure that you weren't gonna have to come back in for quite some time.
Yeah, I'd go get drunk, man. Exactly. I'd go get drunk. So when Jim called me, little Jim called me, I'm like, "Oh man, you know what? I've actually been at the casino drinking." Now, I wasn't at the casino, dude. I was at home, probably watching TV or something with half a fifth down. And I had it all scheduled out because I knew, I'd be good to go if I quit drinking at a certain time. It was lame, dude. But yeah.
Oh yeah. But yeah, no, that's what I'm saying, man. You could be sober, 15, 20 years, man. And Luke, you've heard it, man. You've seen guys go back out after being sober for so long. That insanity is always there, man. It will creep back up. I tell you that you were just going through a phase, Ian.
You know why?
You're not really an alcoholic, man. You were just going through some hard times. And I guarantee you, if you was to pick up a drink, you probably wouldn't drink like you used to drink. You see what I'm saying? There's a voice in there that's doing that, man. That's the disease that's in you that's waiting for an opportunity for that line to work.
A lot of it though, you guys, and Luke just said it. Unless you have that spiritual awakening, that doing away with yourself will, to me, that's what a spiritual awakening is. It's opening yourself up to knowing that there is something greater than you out there, that you're better off if you follow that path, and so when I look at things like and that's why I get so fired up, man, when I start hearing people say, "Oh, we can cure alcoholism," or "We can cure this." It's like, man, I think you're lying. I don't think it's possible, because I see too many people out there, man, that are like, hey, yeah, man, I relapsed after 3 years. I did this. Or they want to argue about whether they're truly sober I've been sober from alcohol for 4 years, meth for 2 years, and I'm trying to quit weed now. And I look at that and I don't even get involved in those conversations, man, because I'm looking at it from my perspective of I would gladly have changed at the time, man. I've said this before. I would have given up drinking for pills. And I knew that, but I knew that my whole thing about the pills was just to get loaded. There was something I still needed to suppress in there. Mm-hmm. It wasn't that I wanted to quit drinking because it was damaging me. I liked the effect of the pills better than the drinking. I didn't like, but that's still sick, man. That's still that insanity in there. There's something deeper inside of me that needed to be dealt with. And that's what Luke was saying, when he was talking about really doing the 4th and 5th step for the last time that he did it, and how it was different than the times before. Just the different guy, different perspective, and it clicked.
Yeah.
And
it was part of it was taking a risk and trusting somebody, because I had to, I was sharing my life with a complete stranger. This guy I didn't know from Adam. And, thank God I believe God placed him in front of me. He had a lot of years of experience of the step work, and especially step 5. And, he was just I don't know if he saw the desperation in my eyes, or, he had been in this scenario before, but he knew exactly what to say and what to get out. And like I said, I tell a lot of guys, there's that treatment center I was talking about. I share sometimes and do a group up there. And I used to hear a lot of times bouncing in and out of AA, I would hear, stick around till the miracle happens. And, for me, I couldn't do that. I couldn't stick around nowhere. And so I tell the guys, man, that just come in, I say, believe it or not, the miracle's already taken place.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that 100%, man. The fact that you're even there breathing is a miracle.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is people that we're seeing in meetings and in treatment centers and just people in general taking a stab at recovery. That's just the tip of the iceberg. So to have that opportunity to not be dead, to not be in jail, and to have an opportunity to recover, that's the miracle, and that's the gift.
Right. I agree.
Once I realize that, I'm grateful. And if I'm grateful, I stay sober and I do for others. And it's a domino effect. And for anybody listening, that's what I suggest that you look at. Are you looking at this as a gift? And if you are, great. Let's keep it moving.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it. So.
Yeah, and that's really good, man, because you hit on two key things here. I think one is this idea that, and Randy mentioned it a little while ago, is that we get so impatient with things and we want that instant gratification, and we are still stuck in self going, well, I didn't drink today. How come this isn't already better? How come this isn't already better? And some of us that have the benefit of a few years in it can look back like we can and say, man, I don't really remember things getting better for some time. However, we can also look at that first day that we were sober and say, that was the miracle. That was a miracle right there. And I'm grateful for that. The next day, the same thing, man, even better, so keeping that, keeping focused on the present, and just being grateful, having that attitude of gratitude, like they say in the rooms. But I want to ask you something, Luke. Do you feel that sobriety, recovery is, if it starts in the room, doing the steps thoroughly, taking advantage of that pathway that was laid out, one alcoholic working with another. Do you feel that it's possible for people to live a life of successful recovery without going to meetings, without really having to do all of that?
I don't believe there's any monopoly on this recovery, because I have seen people change their lives and stay sober. Not many, but I've seen it happen. I guess I can only speak on my experience. I've tried it other avenues. What I can say, I want to answer your question, Ian, but I'm going to have to go around it a little bit, I think, to answer it. So in my own personal life, I had to get to start here in AA and through the steps. But by doing so, it's opened up my life to all spiritual growth. I now attend a church, which I'm getting pretty active in, but I don't think I'll ever be able to totally give up AA. I just, sometimes I only get to a meeting or two a week, but I don't think I'll ever be able to lose that.
Right.
Because there's something with that one-on-one to another alcoholic. And I think there's a couple reasons for that, Ian. I was that guy, and I know you mentioned earlier it sounded like I was a drinker, and I was a drinker. I smoked a lot of cocaine. I did a lot of drugs. So but alcohol was one thing I just could not put down. I got physically addicted to it. So for anybody listening, I ran a gamut on a lot of different things. That treatment center I'm talking about that opened up down the street from me a couple of years ago. I think I was 9 or 10 months sober at the time. And I ran up there when it opened up, and they asked me if I would do a group, and I was honored, and I thought to myself, boy, it'd be pretty selfish of me if I declined that, because I was that guy in and out of those places for so long. I couldn't say no, and I still go up there today, and I'm going to continue going up there just because I'm with my people,
right?
And they can relate to me,
mm-hmm.
and I can relate to them. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to do away with that.
No. And Luke, and I just wanted to say, I know Randy feels the same way. I feel the same way. We should have a soft spot in our heart for those that are still out there suffering. And we should do what we can to give back to the program that has helped us. I agree with that 100%. And I really admire you for that, man, because that is huge. And I really respect you, man, for saying that despite, the spiritual growth that you have, active in your church, doing all of these things, I really have a lot of respect for you saying, man, I don't want to turn my back on something that has helped me. And I do know that can be challenging sometimes, because we hear things in those rooms that we may not agree with,
Sure.
But that's not our place. That's not the platform to challenge the status quo. It's like, hey, if it's like I said before, if I agree to go to that meeting, man, I'm going to adhere to what these meeting rules are. I'm not here to change the temperature of this water. I'm just here to put my toes in like everybody else. And to me, when I hear you say that, man, I get the sense that not only strengthens your program, but it's also a huge blessing, not just to the recovery house that you're going to, but you could probably bring something to that church that you're involved in, because there's such a stigma about addicts and alcoholics out there, where maybe some churches just don't want to deal with them. But some of us, we may be that inroad into that congregation, into that community, is saying, you know what, man, these people are hurting, or simply just educating people about some of the misconceptions they have about the way things work. And I know for me, my dad always used to say, well, just quit drinking. Yeah, it's not that simple. He knows that now, but that is a line a lot of people take. Well, if he just quit doing this, if he just quit doing that. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people think of us, think of, at least an active addict. And I've had more opportunities to talk to mothers and other family members whose loved ones are out there struggling, people will say, hey man, could you come talk to them? Or where do you think we could find some help for this? And man, I'm super blessed when they do that, and the reason they do that is because I've never hidden who I was.
Yeah.
Ever.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm not going to hide, man, who I am, where I've been, or what I've done. And I'll tell you why. Because I don't think it does anybody any favors. It closes a door. You know, I might be that one person that God has left me here for some reason. I don't know what it is, but I might be that one person that needs to come into that person's life just to give them that hope and get them into the direction that they need to be. I might not be the vehicle to take them there, but man, if I can just point the way, a lot of times that's what it takes. Sure. You know, simply put, because I've been on the other side of that too. You know, I've been the guy in the detox center. I've been the guy that, you know, has sat on the other side of H&I panels, you know, but I've also been the guy that has gone to H&I panels in detox centers, into hospitals. And I'm looking out at these people going, man, I can't believe I ever looked that way.
Yeah.
You know, but and it's not pity, man. It's empathy. I feel you, man. I know you're hurting. Yeah. You know, and you're really trying to hopefully they'll hear what you have to say and stuff. But, yeah, dude, that's really cool. So you're pretty involved at that, in that project there, group wise and stuff.
Yeah, I am. You know, sometimes life gets busy and work picks up and I don't get there as often as I want to. But boy, when I have, like today, you know, I had a half a day, I had to call it early on this job site. And, it's funny because I have a friend of mine, from way back in the day who moved to Georgia, and we connected through Facebook, and he was really going through a rough time. And about a month ago, I reached out to him on Facebook. I said, hey man, if you ever wanted to come back up to Ohio and look into getting into some recovery, let me know. And not the next day, he said, hey, I'm getting on a Greyhound. I'm heading your way. And we got him into this place. So I was able to go there today and see him. And I've been going up there and visiting him. And it's just it's a blessing to be able to just to be of service. I mean, to be useful.
Yeah. What just happened there where the guy came on a Greyhound after you spoke with him on Facebook? That power right there, Luke, is, you know, that's like, that's key, man. You know, I believe that right there, helping another alcoholic in that way, man, is key. And the only way to get there is to do what you do, you know, and that's it. I mean,
it's getting through those. Yeah, it's getting through those beginning stages. Like I talked about, getting through the tough times in the beginnings here at home, all that stuff to get to a point to where you can pass this on to somebody else, and that's when it really starts happening.
Yeah. You mentioned you're active in church, and you know, I'll be honest with you guys, man. I've been, you know, really active. I go to Bible study, and just here in the last. It's probably been about since I've been to a meeting, a good month, maybe 2 months. I don't know. Last time I went was with, Brandon, a guy in church, but he OD'd and he's no longer here with us. But he was struggling, and he was real close with the pastor, and, he was struggling. And I remember he's like, it's just not enough. And I remember hearing him say that. He's like, I need something else. And that's when we started going to meetings, and he still was uncomfortable, man. So I was trying to figure him out if he was like kind of using on the side, or I just couldn't put it together, man. But he after the meeting, he started saying to me, he's like, I could tell by his attitude that he didn't like people saying higher power, because he was a big time follower of Christ, and he was touched by, Christ, and so, but what happened was he just started to get, I noticed in that meeting that he was bitter that others weren't saying that, and I thought, wow, maybe that's your problem, man. I don't know. I was just really trying to figure him out, but like Ian and I have talked about it, not everybody's, grew up with hearing about God. People go in these rooms, they don't, that's going to throw them right back out. But it's very hard for a lot of people that we had you guys, we've had parents that cared about us, man, all our lives. Okay. There's so many people that didn't have anything like that.
Right.
But so, they got dealt a bad hand right out the gate, man. And you're going to talk to them about God, and you faced them before Ian and AA. You start talking about God, and you could see, whoa.
Yeah.
Without him saying anything, that this guy's been places where I haven't been.
There's something that I always remember, you guys, that I always hear about when people have questions about evangelism, for instance. Just to take it kind of off this topic for a minute, when they talk about sharing Christ with other people and stuff, and the one thing that always sticks into my mind is that you need to do so with gentleness and with respect. You never want to beat somebody over the head with it. And so, bringing it back to the rooms for a minute, I respect where I'm at in there. I've chosen to go there. I need to respect them, but there's also after the meeting and there's also before the meeting. You don't have to do everything in that circle. There's a lot of fellowship time that happens before and after. And I've had a lot of people, man, they'll come up and say, "Hey man, I want what you got." You always hear that. It's like, really? Yeah, that's kind of weird. Okay. Hey, but it's just that little thing. But it's an opportunity to say, "Hey man, this is where I'm at. This is what worked for me, man. I'm a follower of Christ. I want you to get there, but I also understand, like Randy was just saying, these people, man, that have a problem with God, they come by it honestly in a lot of cases. And I think that that needs to be respected too, because I want nothing more for them at that point, just to remain sober. Get them to a place of safety and of comfort where they're sober, and then the rest will come, hopefully. But they're never going to hear it, man. If number one, if they're running, and number two, if they're threatened by what they're feeling in that room, and I'm not saying that, I'm not going to sugarcoat a lot of what I say in those rooms, man, but I do respect them.
Yeah.
So, but that gentleness and respect and just kind of meeting people where they're at. And you know what, guys? Just because somebody comes up to me and might want to work with me, I got to be honest with them or with myself enough to say, man, I don't know that we're going to mesh, but I'll help you find somebody that you might get along with a little better. And that's how, for me, when I'd go to NA meetings, I kind of felt like an outsider. I got a lot of good out of them, but I'm also like, I don't know, man, I couldn't be a sponsor in an NA meeting. I just can't relate with this guy, as much as I may have wanted to put myself out there in that type of service, it just wasn't a good fit for me. On the flip side of that, though, yeah, AA, I could have a lot in common with a dude that's a drinker, and just the three of us, when we sit down and we start talking about some of the patterns we used to go through, some of those feelings, sneaking off to the bathroom and taking a few shots at the bar, it sounds like we've all been there, and we're not the only three people that have ever been there that have done that type of thing. But the common factor is it's just our way of thinking. I just wanted to come back to two things, or one thing really, and because you both hit it, and I think it's the key, and that's the service. And Luke, I think that's what I was saying to you about, because you've recognized that it's in that service of going back to that group, going back to these rooms. I don't think that God would have you change anything in that, if that's where you're serving, if that's where you're out there meeting his people, whether or not they make it or not, you're doing it, and I think that's really cool, man.
It's been a blessing in my life. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I know I've heard about Randy's friend, before, the guy that OD'd, and that breaks my heart.
that was sad, man, because I was really starting to get to know the guy, and that one hurt, man. And I only knew him for probably 3 or 4 months, man. But I've lost a couple of friends, and you know, all of us, you know, have been affected by this epidemic. But that one hurt, man. That hurt.
Yeah,
that did hurt. It's for like 3 days, man. I was like, I just couldn't really say much. I couldn't, you know, you hear me blabbing right now, but I just didn't want to talk to nobody. I didn't want any bad thoughts. You know how that is, Luke. You just shut down, man. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. There's always, I tell you, I've witnessed, you know, a lot of that stuff like we all have. And there's always that one guy or that one, you know, that one scenario that you're really getting tight with, and then boom, you know, and you try to go back and you look at this situation and you try to figure things out, and it's just tough. It's tough because it's, you know, there's, you know, I can remember, you know, this was going on about a year ago. I mean, it's still going on, but at that treatment center I'm talking about, there was just deaths left and right. Every day I'd come in there, there's a new guy here, OD, this guy, 2 guys, just, it was insane. There was a stretch there where, and everybody would sit and talk about, man, when's this going to end? And the only answer I had, they were looking at me like I didn't know anything. I says, you know, it starts right here. I said, it starts with us right here, because if everybody in this room, there was probably 20 or 30 guys, if all 20 or 30 guys stayed sober and got this message, you know how many people and lives that affects? And then it just blossoms from there. But those same guys that ask, when is this going to end? I don't know the exact numbers, but I know there's a couple of them dead that were asking me that. So, you know, I don't know. I don't know when it's going to end.
Yeah, it's a lot of people are saying that, man. Ian and I mean, I think that's really, Ian and I, you know, I think that's what this really started this podcast, man. You know, we're trying to reach out to more people, man, and everybody's on social media now.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think people are up to going to meetings as much as they used to, you know, like a first time, you know, I just don't think that, I don't know. I'm blabbing here.
Well, that's what it takes, though. I mean, you got to get uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah.
That's the thing, because that's why, you know, you got to be uncomfortable.
Yep.
This thing is not always comfortable. And that's what I ran from all those years.
Yeah.
Because as soon as stuff got uncomfortable, guess what? I don't like alcoholics and drug addicts. They can't stand being uncomfortable. Oh. So that's what happens. We take that shot of dope. We take that shot of whiskey. We take that hit off the pipe, and automatically we're comfortable with ourselves again.
Right. And part of that is, and I'm just thinking about Randy's friend, you know, he's sitting here saying, well, I don't like going in them rooms because they say higher power. They don't acknowledge God, you know. And I think what I was trying to say when I was talking about just respecting the place where we're at is you got to surrender, man. There has to be that surrender, and that surrender leads to all of these other things that you're talking about, this lack of uncomfortability or this lack of comfort, I guess. You have to surrender to that at some point in order for recovery to happen. You know, We all did that, you know, because our fight or flight mechanism that we've trained over years and years, I talked about it before in an earlier episode. They're talking about the Faster scale, and they really kind of line out what a relapse looks like, and they nail it. They nail it, dude. It's like, oh, you're speeding up. You're doing this. You're doing this. You're doing this. Relapse. And the sad part is all of that, the reality of it is all of that can happen within a split second in a mind like mine. I can rationalize, justify. I can go from perfectly normal to drunk within minutes. I've had my mind made up right there. I'm going to relapse, you know? Mm-hmm. So relapse isn't an event. It's a process. And I think what I'm hearing you guys saying, and I agree with it, is that the antidote to that is have another process. Have this process of recovery. And it's not, there's not a one size fits all thing. What Luke does is different than what Randy does. And the two of you are different from what I do, but the core component of it is the same. It's that surrender. It is that giving into that lack of comfort, getting past that, and getting into service. Those three things right there can really make the difference in somebody's life. Yeah, we just lost Randy right there, huh?
Yeah.
That's a great picture of him, man. I should snap a screenshot of that. Dude, that's like when you pause one of those movies, man, and he's like,
yeah.
And the girl's looking all crazy.
Yeah.
But I guess I actually probably need to get rolling here pretty soon. I know it's getting late for you guys too. My little boy was in here tearing stuff up, and we actually have a church function we're going to this evening. But Luke, I just want to thank you for coming on here, man. And like Randy alluded to a minute ago, one of the visions that we had and do have for this podcast is to simply just help people. We want to glorify God. We want to really kind of live that type of mission out for ourselves. But it's one person at a time. I mean, I have people contacting me from England and all these different places. Really cool to kind of hear them that they're being impacted by this. But the truth of the matter is, we can't do that by ourselves, Right. So I'm in constant contact with these people sometimes, they're saying, oh man, I'm really struggling here. What do you think about this? And, a lot of it is step stuff. A lot of it has to do with step work. A lot of it is that insanity coming back in, and they're saying, oh man, you think I'd be okay with this? I'm like, dude, you need to stay sober no matter what. And if that means cutting your trip off, no matter what, man, you have to do what you have to do to maintain that.
And that's the thing too, real quick is, I still keep my eye on that prize. That's my number one goal is just, I've grown spiritually and we hit on different topics and, we can get deep sometimes, but the fact remains the same is that, my number one goal day at a time is to not pick up. And that obsession has left me, but my striving force throughout the day is to grow spiritually. And by doing so, I'm taking an insurance policy out. I'm taking that first drink and that first hit of dope, whatever you want to do.
Sure.
And that's just it.
Yeah. I think that, some people may think that it's, I don't know, maybe there's this misconception that if they do that, they're somehow less than, they're weakened by that. I know I've seen that before. When I was in a sober house, guys would want to take life back on life's terms, and they just weren't equipped, and they ended up going out, and they'd come back in, get booted out of sober living because they broke the rules. They come slinking back in 30 days later, looking really bad, and they're starting over. But the point is they're starting over. That's a good thing too. I have a few friends that really, really struggle, and I pray for them all the time, and try my best just to kind of be there as a friend. And I don't get into their business a whole lot, because the last thing I want to do is point my finger at somebody and say, you should have done this, 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 and this, because that's ridiculous, man. None of us have that. And I see that. And I know you go online, Randy doesn't, but I see that all the time in some of these groups, man, as people are just pointing their finger at people, kind of in this judgmental type of way. And it's like, oh man, you're just driving people out, man. And it's frustrating to me because here we are trying to reach people regardless of who they are, what they believe, any of that. I just want to reach them, man, and say, you know what? There is hope. You get your life back to what it was, and you're in God's hands at that point, you know, as far as I'm concerned. So, Luke, I just want to, man, thank you very much for coming on, man. And I would love to have you back on here and get into some of your other experiences and, you know, keep us up to date on what's happening out there in your life. And it's nice to, you know, you're in Ohio, Randy's on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. Kind of nice to have people in different places, man, so you can kind of get a vibe on what's happening in some of these rooms and in the program, some of maybe what's happening on the street too, you know?
Yeah.
Because I know out here, you know, pills are a big thing, and it's just crazy everywhere, man. I'd like to get somebody over in Vegas or someplace too, man, that could give us a lowdown on what's happening in that scene too. But yeah, man. And I appreciate your support with the podcast and everything too, man.
Oh yeah. Thanks for having me. And it's, I think this is a really good thing you guys got going on, and you know, I'll be more than happy to do whatever it takes to help this along, and I appreciate it.
All right, buddy. Well, sounds good, Luke. And, well, we'll talk to you later, pal.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right, Ian.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.